Hello to everyone joining. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. You have myself, Tina Muir, and Dr. Nicola Rinaldi, who is going to be here today. We want to firstly take thanks to UCAN for setting this up, because how cool is this that a company is kind of taking forward, forward thinking here, and they are doing something that is helping promote women's health. I mean, I think that's amazing in itself. So I know Nick is as grateful as I am about this, but just want to say a little thanks to UCAN for that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tina Muir. I am a 2:36 marathoner. I'm a Saucony-sponsored runner, although recently I've actually got more attention from my decision to stop running than I ever got from being a professional runner. And we're gonna go into that a bit today. But maybe Nick, if you could give a little bit about who you are for anyone watching before we kind of move on a bit.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Nicola Rinaldi. I have a PhD from MIT in computational biology. About 10 years ago, when I was still in graduate school, I was looking to start a family. I went off the pill and I didn't get my period. I had recently decided to lose weight because I thought that was a healthy thing to do when you're trying to get pregnant. But it turns out that I took things a little too far, so I didn't get my period. And so I ended up doing a lot of research and trying to figure out what was going on. And eventually I was given a diagnosis of hypothalamic amenorrhea. And there was really very, very little information out there at the time about how to recover, what to do. So I sort of blazed my own trail and figured out that I needed to eat more and exercise a bit less. It took a long time and a lot of doctors, and I tried the medical route, I tried the natural route. I did eventually get pregnant about 18 months later. And while I was pregnant, I was on bed rest for a while. So I ended up finding an online community of other women suffering from HA, as we'll call it, because it's much easier to say than hypothalamic amenorrhea. And so I really enjoyed sharing my knowledge and my story and helping other women to understand what was going on with their bodies and, figure out how they needed to, what changes they needed to make to recover. After many years of doing this, people kept saying to me, you should write a book, you should write a book. And eventually I was like, yeah, I should. And so after my third son was born, I stopped working and researched the heck out of this topic and did a survey of over 300 women to sort of get a sense of the range of people that experience HA and what people have done to recover. And so I have all that in the book, plus my story and the stories of many of these other women. And so I'm just trying to spread awareness about a condition that, I think affects more and more of us as, our society is teaching us that we need to be sort of fit and thin, and that's, the ideal, without necessarily taking into account the health consequences. So, yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
No, I think that's really good that you explained that. And obviously, people who are joining here are either going through something themselves or have either, got a family member or a friend or maybe suspect someone might be going through it. And actually today, an article from Well and Good, which was actually showing my story. I don't know where they got that stat from and whether you've even heard of that stat, Nick, of saying that 69% of women will at some point go through hypothalamic or some kind of amenorrhea. I don't know where they got that stat. I'll have to look it up and see. But
that's a little high from the research I've done, but it's definitely, the research I've seen is that it's about 3 to 4% of the population that will suffer from HA at some point.
Okay. Yeah, that's rather high then. But either way, everyone here is kind of wanting to learn more, and this is something, women's health, we're talking about women's health this week, obviously an important point to kind of bring up, and you took it on yourself to kind of research it. And I'm guessing when you kind of like came out with it and kind of said that this was what was going on with you and found that community, that there really wasn't hardly anyone at all talking about this other than in that community. Would you say it's any different now to then, or is it just as quiet now as it was then?
I think there's a lot more information out there now. There are a bunch of websites, like there's Paleo for Women. They talk a lot about hypothalamic amenorrhea. There are a number of women that I've worked with who have blogged about their stories. And I think in general there's more awareness of sort of how dieting can affect us negatively, sort of just overall. And, there's a health at every size movement that kind of fits really nicely with this. So I definitely think that there's more information now, but you still kind of have to look for it. It's not, it's not in your face like the lose weight and, all that kind of stuff is.
So then maybe talk about that a little bit, because, I've mentioned, for anyone who knows my story, I've mentioned that the reason I didn't say anything was because I was always afraid of being given a stigma that there was one reason why I didn't have a cycle. So maybe you could go over the various reasons that people have cycles, and just how, this really can affect anyone. I mean, even down to someone who is very overweight, who loses a few pounds too quickly. Like, maybe go over just how serious this is and how easy it can happen for everyone.
Yeah, so what I found is that there are 5 factors that are involved in experiencing this kind of amenorrhea. There's the biggest one is often under eating or restrictive eating. So not necessarily eating too few calories, but sometimes even the clean eating can affect us, because our bodies do need a combination of the different nutrients, and especially if we're exercising. And the second factor is sort of body size, weight, or weight loss over time. So HA does tend to be more common in women who are in smaller bodies. So here we're showing a slide of data from my survey, just of the BMI of the different women when they discovered that they had HA. So the median is about 19, which is quote unquote normal, and many women say, but I'm normal, why am I losing my period? But it actually turns out that that's a bit low for fertility. But you can see on this distribution that there are women who experience HA who are at higher BMIs and much lower BMIs. So it tends to be in women in smaller bodies, but not necessarily. What is even more true is that it happens in women that have lost a significant amount of weight. So by significant, I'm talking like 10 pounds or more. So in the graph on the right side, you can see on the left the high BMI of the women in my survey, and on the right their BMI when HA was discovered. So you can see that in all of the groups there was a fairly significant weight loss. This is about 83% of the women in my survey. So for many of us, it's a combination of that weight loss, and sometimes it's not even that recent. Sometimes it can be a few years in the past, but I think it just sensitizes our bodies to losing menstrual function.
So can I just ask you one question before you go on with that? So when you said about losing weight, how quickly are you talking here? Like, is it the course of a year? Is it the course of like a few months? Like, how quick does the kind of weight loss tend to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in my case, it was over the course of about a month. I lost about 15% of my body weight, which, like, in hindsight, I'm like, what was I thinking? So I think for many women, it does tend to be quick-ish, but I'd say, in a way, it doesn't really seem to matter over what time frame it was. I think that just the act of, especially if we're getting below our body's set points and kind of keeping it there, that just that alone kind of sensitizes you to be more likely to lose your period. So then, if you throw the next factor is exercise. So many women who lose their periods are doing a significant amount of exercise. Vernon, if we can go to I think the next slide after this one. Or it's just so we have the median. Yeah. So there's a wide range in the amount of exercise. But if you look at the red box, that's where the majority of us fall, and that's exercising 5 to 7 days a week for an hour to 2 hours or more. There are women who get HA who don't really exercise that much. That's the blue box on the bottom left corner. But you can see the vast majority of us are exercising quite a bit. And also we tend to exercise at, we tend to push the intensity of our exercise because, we've sort of been taught that, if exercise is good, more exercise is better, and the harder you're working, the better it is for you. That's sort of the mantra that we learn. And so a lot of us will push ourselves really hard, and it's fabulous. It feels amazing, and I'm sure you can relate to that, Tina. I know. I can't even imagine running a marathon. But, so in the right-hand graph, you can see in the green the exercise intensity of women before they had HA, and the red is sort of how they pushed it up. And that increase in intensity can be, sort of the last straw that causes the amenorrhea. And I think you said that you think that was the case for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely saw a correlation when I lost it once and then I lost it again, and both times it wasn't even so much the mileage. And that's one thing I guess I'll mention right now for anyone listening. Like, it isn't necessarily, yes, I was running 90 to 100 miles towards the end of my training time. But when I first lost mine, I was probably running 30 miles a week. A lot of it was at intensity. And then the same when I lost it the second time, I was at 40, 50. So it doesn't have to be that you are, running the same amount of miles as an elite runner. It can be just the intensity. And for me and my body, obviously it was the like you said, the pushing yourself too hard that was kind of the kickstarter with it. And tell us maybe how running plays into this, as I know probably most people listening, or a lot of people listening, are runners.
So I'm not really sure what it is, but in my experience, running seems to be among the worst exercises for causing amenorrhea. And there was a research study done by Mary Jane D'Souza a few years ago where she looked at sort of menstrual cycles in women who are runners. And about 55% of them had some kind of abnormality, either what's called a luteal phase defect, which is the time between when you ovulate and when you get your period, and it's shorter than it should be, or anovulation, which means that you're not actually ovulating even though you're getting a period every month. So that was the case in 55% of the runners, and some of them, I think the average miles per week was only 18 miles. So, there's something about running, and I don't know what it is. But yeah, I mean, it can cause either cycle defects or amenorrhea. But the nice thing is that, once you recover and you get your cycles back, I think once that's happened, if you do completely fuel afterwards, then you should be able to maintain your cycle. So it's kind of there's some energy balance that's playing into it, and there's some just the high intensity or stress of running or other high intensity exercises. I mean, I was never a runner. My exercise choices were ice hockey and volleyball and squash and biking and weightlifting and golf. And
everything else in between except running.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So I have a theory though with that. I haven't told you this before, and for those watching, Nick and I talk quite a lot, but I think a lot of it might be because as runners, we're such type A, driven, I'm going to do this, I'm going to win that, I'm going to be the best at this, and just I think runners are naturally drawn to that, drive yourself, be competitive with yourself, we don't need anyone else. And I personally think that might be a part of it. We're such highly strung people for the most part, and I think that could be a big part of it. And if you have any questions, you guys, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and we will get to them towards the end. But Nick, I want you to bust some myths that people may have been kind of saying over the years. Starting with what I considered the big one, which is, many people will probably say either I'm on birth control and I bleed every month, so I'm fine, or my doctor said it's okay, they're going to put me on birth control and that will figure it out, or the other way around, where they don't have a period but it's because of the birth control. So kind of explain to us all the myths around that.
That's a fantastic question, Tina. So first of all, getting a bleed on birth control pills tells you absolutely nothing about your reproductive health. It is totally artificial, just based on the hormones that you're taking every month. Some women stop getting a bleed when they're on birth control, and that should really be a red flag, because if your body isn't even well enough to respond to those hormones, there's definitely a problem. As far as sort of the other side of it, women going to their doctors and saying, I'm not getting period, what should I do? And then the doctor saying, oh, here, take the birth control pills. I'm really, really not in favor of that, because all you're doing is masking the problem. You're not solving it. And there's more and more research that shows that while birth control pills do maintain bone density, which is one of the biggest issues with not getting a period long term, it doesn't help to increase bone density like your natural estrogen and other hormones in your cycle can. So, you know, it's given, birth control pills are kind of given out as a panacea, and they're really not. I think it's really important for women to look at their lives and look at their lifestyles and, you know, figure out, you know, am I eating enough? Am I eating enough different food groups? Am I exercising too much? Am I too stressed? You know, there's one of the things that's really amazing about working with women to recover from this is how many women just feel so much more liberated and free and happy after they've gone through this process. I mean, it really, really, really sucks to go through it, because you feel like you're doing everything right and you should be so healthy, and you're not, and you have to kind of undo all of your hard work and, you know, go in the other direction, and you just, you know, you can feel gross and like whatever and miserable because you can't exercise. But, you know, so many women having gone through that have told me how thankful they are for the process and, you know, the outcome. And, you know, when they have kids, being able to like enjoy the time with their kids instead of constantly worrying, you know, making themselves separate meals, or, you know, spending 2 hours in the gym and, you know, having their kids with a babysitter. I mean, there's just so many positives to like realizing that a lot of what we've been taught sort of by the diet and exercise industry is actually very life constraining. And, you know, it's perfectly possible to be healthy and, you know, eat well without restricting and exercise because it feels good, not because you have to, and, you know, not to the level where you feel like you're punishing your body. And yeah, so.
No, I think that's good.
That was
and
a
I think,
long answer.
No. I think that was great. And actually, I think this is a good time now if I kind of explain my story for anyone who doesn't know, or maybe if you do know me, then maybe you know a little bit, but not all of it. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I am a professional runner. I'm sponsored by Saucony. I'm also sponsored by UCAN, who are the wonderful people behind this webinar and this whole series. I had been kind of suffering in silence for the last 9, maybe even longer years, because as we discussed earlier, I ended up losing my period around, the first time I lost it around 17, and then it came back a little bit, and then I lost it properly at age like 19, and then it never came back. I had one forced cycle because I kept kind of, let's say, bullying the doctors to do something about it. So they, you know, put me on some really strong hormones to kind of force a period to just prove that I could. And then after that, it was like, okay, case closed, you're fine. Just stop running. And, you know, it's all very well us telling you this if you are listening and you're going through this, or someone telling me years ago, you know, just stop running. And I was like, oh, you know, just like that, just stop. And I thought, what are you talking about? I'm not going to stop running. And, you know, to me, it was terrifying, the idea of that. But at the same time, I didn't dare tell anyone. I mean, I had a few close family and friends, but whenever anyone would kind of have the discussion about cramps or, you know, I'm feeling really bloated, I'd be like, yeah, me too. Because I was too embarrassed to say anything because there was a definite stigma, and I was, you know, kind of embarrassed to say that my body felt broken and it wasn't working correctly. And, you know, and I was obviously chasing some big dreams of my own. I had a goal of representing Great Britain in the World Half Marathon Championships. Or I had a goal of representing Great Britain in a World Championships, I should say. And then I achieved that goal in April or March of 2016. And then I noticed that suddenly my dedication and motivation to keep doing the little things in running kind of started to fade away a little bit. I still wanted to run. I was still running 90 miles a week. I was still doing everything I needed to, but I just noticed that I was more interested in why my health wasn't working and what was wrong with me. So I started making changes. I started eating more. I started resting more. I started changing my diet to have more fats. And In hindsight, actually, Nick, looking back, I think I actually was reducing my carbohydrates, which actually was probably making it worse. But I thought by adding more fats, it would help. And so I kept going, and then my sister ended up getting pregnant, and that was kind of a real reminder for me that something was missing here. And for me at that time, it wasn't even about starting a family, but it was just like, okay, I'm a girl and I don't have a period, and I haven't had one in a long time. And then, so about 8 weeks ago today, I was out on a run, and I just kind of had a bit of a mental breakdown, and I decided, you know what, I've had enough. I realized my heart wasn't in it. I felt like I had a window of opportunity to kind of jump through before my motivation came back, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to take it. So I stopped running. I haven't run a step since. Longest I've taken off by far. As Nick talked about, I've been going through this recovery journey. I haven't seen anything yet. It has been 8 weeks, and Nick knows I have been kind of venting to her a little bit, like, why isn't this happening yet? Like exactly what she said earlier, like, I've done everything you asked me to. I've stopped running. I've eaten more. I've gained weight. I've rested. I've done everything. Like, where is it? And it is difficult, but at the same time, exactly what she said, it's so liberating to be able to go to a restaurant and say, what do I actually want on this menu? Not, oh, I really should have this because I'm trying to train hard and I need to eat well, but what do I actually want? And it's been really nice, and having like extra ice cream and not feeling guilty. And I'm not going to lie, there's been a lot of tough moments. It's hard kind of seeing my body in the mirror sometimes and thinking, whoa, or actually, I shouldn't really say this live, but oh well, people know me for being honest. Yesterday, I walked into a friend's office, and he said to me, oh, you're getting a bit chubby. And I was like, I can't believe he's a good friend, and I know him and he's fine. But at the time, I was like, did you really just tell me I look chubby? But I know him well enough, so I'm fine with it. Yeah. But anyway, so, it's more like just awareness. But like you said, it's been so liberating to be able to just kind of let go and have fun, and, have a few glasses of wine at night and just relax and just be chill and be still. And yeah, like you said, not be timed down to that constraint, and straighten my hair and leave it straight for a few days. For those of you who don't know me, my hair is very curly. So it's nice to straighten it and keep it straight. So there's a lot of like good things here. And so, for anyone who is going through this right now, I just want to say to you, I know it's terrifying, and a lot of you have reached out to me, but what we're talking about here is so important. And at the end of the day, your long-term health is more important. And Nick, you've kind of talked about, the bone density issue. So let's kind of say, are there any other long-term risks that you've come across from like not having a cycle?
Yeah, unfortunately there are. So, well, it's kind of speculation because, we don't have any long-term studies on women with HA. But HA is actually very similar to menopause in many ways, because the hormonal profile is similar in that you have very low estrogen. You're not getting any sort of change in estrogen and progesterone throughout the cycle. And I actually just saw a paper the other day where they did compare women with HA, a group of 160 women with HA to women with menopause, and they found just about every category of thing they looked at was similar. So in terms of the different hormone levels, in terms of cholesterol levels, all the parameters that they looked at, and many of them were actually different from women who were normally cycling. So the couple of other issues, the couple of other big issues that have been found in women with premature menopause due to surgery, like if a woman has had a hysterectomy or ovarectomy, they've studied those women to see, what the long-term effects are, and some of them are effects on the heart. So issues with cardiovascular disease and a higher risk of getting cardiovascular disease, and that actually has also been shown in women with HA, that there can be some narrowing of the arteries, and also in women with anorexia. And then the second one is there are some suggestions that there might be things like earlier dementia or other, neurodegenerative issues. So, it's really hard to look at our age to, think about 30, 40, 50 years down the line. But I can tell you a good friend of mine has a mom with osteoporosis, and it's just so debilitating because she can do, she doesn't even have to fall to break a bone, just like everyday activity can cause, bone breaks. In women our age who have osteoporosis because of, long-term disordered eating or overexercise, getting pregnant can be dangerous because when you're pregnant, your bone density can decrease, and also when you're breastfeeding. So doctors can be concerned about, getting pregnant, and that's something that can be really hard to deal with. And some people with HA don't have bone density issues. Some of them do. It's all of this stuff. It's very, very individualized. What your particular situation is, what's causing your particular HA, what it's going to take for you to recover, what your consequences are. But I think it's so important to recover fertility and do what we can to prevent these long-term issues.
No, I do think that's important that you did mention those other things, especially as, and I'm the perfect example of this. It's almost too easy to kind of push it out of your mind. I noticed it was gone like almost straight away, and then it was kind of like, oh, I'll take care of it in 6 months. And then 6 months came along and it's like, oh, I'm kind of busy. I'll deal with it in a few more months. And you keep pushing it off, and then, I'd go to the doctors for a checkup, and they'd ask me, what was the date of your last period? And I'd say, I don't know. And then they would remind me, and it would put it back in my head. But then sure enough, it would pass out, and I would just kind of carry on my life. And before I knew it, it was 9 years. So, if this is something that you're dealing with right now, or someone's dealing with, like, it's so, so, so important to get it taken care of. And you have to ask yourself, like, are you prepared to kind of take the sacrifice that you're giving? And yeah, maybe you won't have an issue, but for myself, I had one stress reaction in my entire running career, in 14 years, no other bone issue at all. So for me, it was kind of made it easy to ignore because my bone density kept coming back as like healthy. And so I was like, oh, I'm fine. I don't have to worry about that. But obviously I don't know about the long-term effects. So even if you're not getting bone injuries, but especially if you are, you really have to kind of ask yourself, is it really worth kind of sacrificing, your long-term health? And as Nick mentioned, you can always go back to it, which I thought was really important, that like you're not saying that you have to stop and never run again or never exercise again, but once you get it back, if you're smart with it, then you can actually continue to train, so you can go back to your exercise, or you can go back to your goals.
Yep.
And looking back, I'm not sure what I would have done, just because of that big long-term goal I had, whether I would have accomplished it or not. But I don't know, maybe my answer will be different in a year's time when I've kind of had some more time to reflect. But as of right now, for me, it's hard to kind of say what I would have done had I changed it. And maybe we could kind of talk about, you mentioned earlier about in the recovery process. We can talk about that now. You said about people finding like a set point, a weight that their body is very comfortable with, and that kind of hits three of the areas of the factors that you talked about. So how does someone know what their set point is, and whether they're kind of on it, or what they need to kind of gain or change, basically?
Well, for a lot of us, our set point tends to be around the weight that we were at before we started losing weight. So, there are some women who were in much bigger bodies at one point, and they may have been above their set point and then, lost weight to, closer to where their set point is. But in general, women that have HA are sort of keeping their weight artificially low, and that's sort of shown here in this slide, where I looked at the weight change in women who were in a number of different studies of HA, and in general, it did take gaining some weight, around 2 to 3 BMI points to restore cycles, and sometimes we have to go higher than our set point is in order to get our cycles to return. I actually have a blog post on this, and maybe I'll post at the end. And I think it just, sometimes we have to push our bodies a little bit, more in the opposite direction and go over our set point for them to actually feel comfortable with cycling again. So sometimes it takes cutting more exercise and gaining more weight than we actually had to in the past. But again, once we're sort of over that hump and recovered, I generally say wait 3 cycles, and then you can start adding back some exercise and, just sort of eat naturally and, see where your body ends up.
Mm-hmm. And for someone, I'm sure there's some people out here asking this, and I've definitely thought this at times. So, let's say you find your set weight and you're sitting there and you think, okay, I'll stay here and I'll keep my weight here, but eventually I want to, lose weight again. I want to be lean or whatever. Like, is it possible for people who are susceptible to HA to eventually lose the weight? Is it a case of doing it very slowly, or is it something you would completely recommend against and kind of encourage people to stay at that weight once they've found it?
So it's a really tricky question, but I would really encourage people to think about why they feel like they need to lose weight and what is the actual purpose in it, because I think that society has this again, as we talked about at the beginning, sort of glorification of the very thin sort of almost prepubescent look, and it's hard to say. I mean, I guess if somebody really wanted to go back to that, I would suggest doing it slowly and carefully and sort of monitoring effects on your cycle. But again, it's like if you're, a womanly body is attractive. I mean, like having breasts and a rear end and, it's like, so I struggle with that question because it's, I think that our society has us sort of trying to artificially manipulate our bodies in a way that's, I think it's much better just to enjoy your life and eat what you want to eat and, kind of.
No, I'm glad
whatever,
you did that because, people who know me or have known me for years know that I've always been very like body proud and very like, I do not cut out my desserts. I do not, go to extremes. I will have fried chicken. I always have, always will. And, I think people often kind of look at professional runners or like the top level people that they look up to and say, they've got a 6-pack. I need a 6-pack. But, one of the things that I've learned during this process is looking back on pictures of myself, and I guess I haven't mentioned this yet, but for anyone who doesn't know this kind of story, my story has, I think I can say, blown up on the internet, and it's been in like ESPN, Well and Good, People magazine, Shape, Self. There's so many of them, Glamour, all kinds of things. And one thing I've kind of learned going through this is when I look back at the comparison photo of me at my peak, it was 3 weeks before that goal race that I said about running for Great Britain, and I look at myself now, I actually look at that picture of me before and I think, wow, I was so thin. But at that time, I thought to myself, well, I'm still bigger than everyone else. Like everyone around me, I'm still one of the bigger elite runners. But like looking at that image of me, I'm like, okay, I was completely distorted. So we all, I think, have this distorted perception of ourselves, and we see other people who we look up to and we think, oh, I need to look like that. But actually, maybe you already do look like that. And even like now, I'll look at myself in what I see in the mirror and I think, oh, I'm huge. But then I'll see a photo and I'm like, actually, I don't really look that different. So we're very distorted. So, I've kind of learned that this has been so nice to not have that constant like fear of like, I need to look like this. And let me just tell you guys, I've been saying this for years, that it does not matter what you weigh. If you want to run fast, you can run fast, and it's better to be overfueled than underfueled. And that's the way you're going to get a long-term success. That's the way you're going to look after your body. And, I guess maybe we can talk about how people would recover. Like if they did decide, I want to recover, what can I do? I mean, I saw we have a question from Maria or Melissa. about kind of going on like a farewell tour and how she can, if she can do anything while she's on this like farewell tour. And I definitely can speak to that because it's kind of exactly what I just did. And I tried pretty much everything and nothing worked. But are there any suggestions you would make for people who are thinking, you know, what can I do nutritionally or, you know, in the rest of my life to kind of help with the process?
So I think the biggest recommendations, and I have a whole section on this in my book, so, you know, I think that it's important. Yeah. So, you know, I can give you the cliff notes, but I think reading and understanding the rationale behind the recommendations can be really helpful. You know, for me, I'm a scientist. I like to understand why I'm told to do something as opposed to just, here, do this, you know, it's going to work. I'm like, no, but why? Why is it going to work? So that's all in the book, along with, you know, other stories of many other women that have gone through this. And what I want to point out that kind of speaks to what you were just talking about, Tina, is my friend Jen, and she ran a 3:30 marathon when she had HA, and then she gained 20 pounds, had 2 kids, and her personal best is now 3:03. So, you know, that just speaks to the fact that you do not have to be super tiny to, you know, to run well and run fast. And then actually, you know, being fully fueled, as you said, can you know, be better for your running or whatever else you want to do in your life. So the general recommendations for recovery are to increase calories to 2,500 or more a day. You know, a lot of times, you know, that can seem like a crazy amount, especially, you know, if you have been told, you know, you should eat 1,500 calories a day or maybe 1,200 calories a day. You know, that's the level I was at when I gave myself HA. You know, I was eating 1,500 and then exercising on top of that. And, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, what was I thinking? So we suggest 2,500 calories a day. And eating all different food groups. So, like you're saying, many of us like to eat a low-fat diet. You know, certainly when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, that was the craze, and like, you know, to eat low-fat to lose weight, and so that was my thing. And so definitely eating enough fat and protein. And today's thing is low carb, or, you know, quote unquote clean eating. But the truth is that our body senses the amount of carbohydrates that we eat. You know, the change in glucose and insulin that comes when you eat particularly simple carbs actually affects your hypothalamus. And so if you're really not getting those bumps in glucose and insulin throughout the day, that can help to keep your hypothalamus suppressed. So starting with upping your calories. If you can do it all at once, great. If you need to take it more slowly, then that's fine too. I mean, for me, it was really a struggle to increase calories because I had gotten so into the mindset, and so, you know, I got addicted to seeing the number on the scale going down. You know, it was numbers I hadn't seen since college, and it was like, oh my God, you know, this feels great. I think, you know, I look great, but my body just didn't agree with that assessment. So I had a hard time adding calories. I went to see a nutritionist, and she suggested things like going from skim milk to 2% and going, you know, adding nuts as a snack. And so, you know, whatever you can do to add more fuel into your day, I think will be helpful. But sort of aiming for about 2,500, if you can do that, is great. And certainly more if you're hungry, because a lot of times when women start eating more, their bodies are like, whoa, and they can actually start making hormones again, and those hormones tell us to eat more. So it's like we can, you know, it can be really you know, it can actually be really scary sometimes because you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to stop eating. Like, I started and now I'm never going to stop, and, you know, I'm going to all of a sudden be the size of this room, and, you know, that's really not how it works. So it's just all about, you know, fueling your body and satisfying your cravings. I can't tell you how many times, like, people come to me and are like, I'm craving all these bad things. And it's like, just eat them. You know, if you want ice cream, eat ice cream. If you want to go to McDonald's, go to McDonald's. If you continually don't satisfy those cravings, they just get worse and worse. Once you eat that ice cream, then you're like, oh, great, I had ice cream. It's all good. So, yeah, and one of the huge things in this is sort of letting go of the compulsions around food. So the counting calories. I mean, I'm saying eat 2,500 calories, but the ultimate goal is not to count calories anymore. It's just to listen to your body. You know, no more macro counting. Just no more fear foods, not being afraid to eat anything. There's no food that you're going to eat that is all of a sudden, you know, you're going to eat one bite and it's going to be toxic. Or, I mean, well, yeah, I suppose there are poisons, but, you know, things we typically consider food. You know, you can have a cookie, you can have chocolate. You know, it's not going to be the end of the world. And I think you've sort of experienced that, and you've said that you're eating all foods, and you know, what are your thoughts on that, Tina?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many things from that. I mean, the first thing is when I did start kind of when I stopped running, I thought, oh, you know, my metabolism will slow right down, and I'm gonna, you know, I always heard people saying, when I stop running, when I take a week off, my metabolism goes way down, and I'm not hungry anymore. And I thought, oh, that will happen to me. But sure enough, I started eating more, and I let go of all the restrictions. And like I said, I was never someone who was like, oh, I can't have dessert or I need to eat really healthy. I did eat healthy, but I wasn't compulsive about it. Like if I went out to dinner, I was going to get a burger and fries because this is a special occasion. So I was never like that, but I kind of went, I want to say off the rails a little bit, and I just was like, let me have it all. And like whenever I would, you know, feel like fear about it, I'd actually read your book, and that would help me to see that, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Because it wasn't, I'd love eating it. It would be like a few hours later, I'd be like, oh, I'm so full, I shouldn't have eaten that much. But then I started noticing that, you know, my hunger kept increasing. And then, yeah, I went to that thing of thinking what you were saying, where I forgot that like there's a difference between you now, or like me as I was, and obese. I kind of thought I forgot there was this whole range of people in the middle, and I thought if I kept eating, I'm just going to keep letting myself go, and I would end up suddenly, and I'm, you know, 300 pounds, and everyone's like, whoa, what happened to her? And I forgot that there's this whole middle ground of normal people in there. And then I noticed that after about 6 weeks of eating that way, it wasn't that I still got hungry, but my portion sizes needed to be less. And found I could go longer without actually being starving. Like I found at the beginning, it was like 2 hours after I'd eaten, I'm still hungry. And I was thinking, how am I so hungry? I'm not running. But I think it was like you said, my body was in that repair state. And then in the last few weeks, I've kind of reached a point where I feel like I'm leveling out, and I'm understanding what hunger means. Like when I get hungry, I eat. When and I know that sounds crazy to anyone listening, because I was the same way, in that I kind of almost like mindlessly ate quite a lot, but actually looking at it, I think I was a little bit hungry at all those times, and I was kind of grazing all day long, but not sitting down for a proper meal, so I wasn't ever like satiated. And then finally, the other thing I wanted to mention is, as I said earlier, I definitely went a bit too low off the carbs end of things at some point, trying to eat too high fat and high protein. And I think that kind of didn't help the situation. But I want to say, for anyone who's listening, you know, this podcast, this webinar is sponsored by Generation UCAN. And, you know, for anyone who is kind of finding it scary, and like Nick said, there's different levels, you know, for you, for someone, having 2,000 calories might be absolutely terrifying, and you don't want to add the sugar, and you're not quite ready to have ice cream. But maybe Generation UCAN is really a good option. And I ate a lot of the bars and had the powder in my drinks, just because it helps give you the extra carbs, the extra calories, but you're not necessarily like pummeling yourself with sugar. So, you know, obviously, as Nick mentioned, the goal is to kind of let go of all restrictions, but maybe if you need like a baby step, Generation UCAN is a good alternative to kind of like edge your way into kind of allowing yourself to have more carbs and more of those kind of foods that are going to help with the repair. Would you agree with that, or what are your thoughts on that?
It also sounds like it's a good way to add calories, because a lot of times people struggle with feeling overly full, like you were saying, and so having options for adding calories without adding a lot of volume can actually be really helpful.
Yep, I think that's good. And so one thing I wanted to kind of ask about was, one thing that I've really kind of kept in mind during this whole process is that I'm thinking of like the teenagers of tomorrow or the young girls of tomorrow. So if someone is listening and they've got maybe a daughter or they've got a family friend who, you know, they fear might go through this, especially with what, like you mentioned, the societal pressure to be a certain weight, what would you kind of say to someone listening who maybe, you know, maybe is a man or maybe is someone who has a daughter who could in the future go through this? How can they kind of prevent this happening for them?
Wow.
Sorry, quite a loaded question there.
So, I mean, I think some of the biggest things are really keeping the house free of weight talk. And, you know, I know so many people who have been sort of taught portion control from a very young age. You know, as kids, we naturally eat you know, what's right for our bodies, and we don't let our heads get in the way like we've learned to as adults. And you know, I think sort of honoring that in our children, I think, is a wonderful way to move forward and sort of get out of this mindset of, you know, we should be restricting all the time. And, you know, it goes both ways, you know, like forcing kids to clean their plate. I mean, you know, I don't know if that was your experience as a kid, but, you know, it was often mine. Like, you have to eat everything, you know, eat everything on your plate before you can have dessert. Or, you know, I mean, just, I think really, really important not to focus on other people's weight, your own weight in particular as a parent, because our kids pick up on that so much. Like, if you're denigrating yourself in front of them, they're going to learn that, and they're going to learn that their bodies are not acceptable and that your body is not acceptable and needs to be changed. And, you know, that can just set up so many negative patterns going forward, whereas if, you know, if you're just somebody who accepts your body as it is and, you know, doesn't talk about it in front of your kids in a negative way, I think that can really be helpful for them to then see their own bodies in a positive light.
Okay. Yep, that's helpful. And would you recommend, you know, parents should try and, I don't want to say like interfere with their teenage daughter's life or like kind of ask about it, or is it something that, you know, it's going to be kind of obvious with if they're going through it, and if that is the case, maybe book a doctor's appointment or something? Is it something that the earlier you get it checked, the better?
I think so, yeah. I mean, you know, I have the ideas of maybe finding a teenage partner and writing a book for teenagers, because, you know, it's quite a long time ago for me. So, you know, I'm not really, you know, I'm sort of out of the teenage mindset, and I don't have a teenager myself yet. But I think it's really important for parents to kind of keep an eye on this kind of thing, and, you know, the over-exercise and under-eating, because a lot of girls, sort of, especially in high school, is when the disordered eating starts. And, you know, I think catching it early and going to see a psychologist or somebody who's trained in this area, because that's certainly not my forte or my training. But, you know, I think that it is really important to kind of keep an eye on some of those, you know, behaviors, and try and support somebody in not going down that path, as, you know, when they're a teenager particularly, or college too.
Okay. And
sorry.
then, oh no, you're fine. So I guess I want to wrap up with, you can talk about the book and we can kind of talk about what people can do, but just one more thing for anyone who is watching, who is maybe thinking, you know, Melissa mentioned about being on kind of like a final tour, and to Melissa or to anyone who is thinking, you know, I'm about ready to kind of stop here, my advice to you would be, enjoy it. Don't put pressure on it. Don't say, this is it, this is all I've got, I have to do it now, I have to do this, because otherwise I'm never going to do it again, because you're never going to enjoy it. You're going to end up crashing and burning out of the sport and hating it. Whereas just kind of say, I really want to enjoy this, I'll go back to it someday, but I want to put my health first for a while. Like, just don't put pressure on it if that is you. But let's say that is someone is watching right now and they're thinking, oh, you know, well, yeah, I really want to run this, or I want to do that, and then I want to do these few things, and then I'll think about it. Like, is there anything you would like to say to someone to kind of encourage them, like, don't wait, or kind of, you know, really think about what you're doing, other than what we've already discussed?
Well, honestly, I think that this is all sort of a balancing act between competing desires that we have within ourselves. And so, if somebody wants to run another marathon before they start thinking about that, that should be fine. I mean, this is all sort of long-term stuff, and everybody has to make a decision for themselves about what their priorities are. And, if you want to run a marathon before having kids or before trying to get your period back, by all means, go ahead and do it. And then, you can take the time for your health afterwards. It's not a do or die situation. I mean, when you decide you want to get pregnant, then it kind of is, because, not only is it difficult to get pregnant naturally, but honestly, if you have HA, your response to fertility medications is probably going to be blunted. And I would really, really encourage people to work on recovery before trying to get pregnant, because doctors will say to you, oh, don't worry about it. We can give you these medications. We'll get you pregnant. But the pregnancy is really hard, both physically and emotionally, and having the resources, both in your body, maybe an extra bit of fat to kind of support the growing baby, as well as the mental resources, so that you can fully fuel your pregnancy and not end up being, having really low weight gain that can affect your child, and, having struggling with eating during pregnancy. So honestly, working on recovery before trying to get pregnant, I just cannot recommend it enough. Mm-hmm. And that's one way, if you're looking to get pregnant, that's one way that you can kind of frame the changes that you're making is, people often need to buy new clothes, because, and I really recommend that, because, if you're walking around in jeans that are too tight and cutting into you, that's a reminder the whole day that, you've put on a few pounds. And whereas if you buy new clothes, then it's like, I feel great,
Everything I'm wearing is new, head to toe.
And stretchy clothes. Stretchy clothes are awesome, it's your first trimester outfit, right? Yeah. And the fertile zone for BMI is generally 22 plus. Some women might regain cycles at a slightly lower weight than that, but I typically recommend aiming for 22 plus BMI. And all the caveats about BMI, I understand, but it's a marker we can use. And turn your fear foods into fertility foods, like, ice cream and those things. So just framing everything that you're doing in terms of how it's going to help your fertility and help you get pregnant, if that's why you are looking to restore cycles, I think can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I want you to, in a minute, talk about your book, and maybe if you want to answer Shannon's question, although Shannon, I think your question might be a little bit more for, I don't know if Nick's going to be able to answer that question about, Shannon's been through this, but she's basically had a lot of stressful situations, so just wondering, what she can do really. But I thought while you're thinking about that, I would just kind of say a few more things that I'll throw out for people, kind of help to reframe my mindset. Like Nick said, buying new clothes. I couldn't even get not one pair of my old jeans over my hips to even put them on, let alone like tighten them up. But the buying new clothes is one of them. I actually like seeing, one of the quotes that has been used over and over again that I got from the book was, building a 5-star baby hotel. That was a great way to look at it. Thinking of it as like a kangaroo pouch, or building a nice soft pillow for the baby to lay on. And those are all obviously baby things. And then I actually have this book here, which I write in to my future child. So that's another one that I've been using, like just to keep it in the front of my mind. And there you go. We've got some affirmations there, which are helpful. But maybe you could tell everyone a bit about the book, which I'll kind of hold up while you talk about it, because this has been my Bible for anyone who is going through this, whether you want to be, whether you want to get pregnant or not, whether you just want to get your period back. This has been such a good book. So maybe Nick, tell us a bit more about it.
Sure. So, like I talked about at the beginning, this kind of came out of the, it was an online message board that I was on. And there were questions that came up over and over and over again. And so I ended up dividing the book into 5 sections. So the first one is sort of what's going on with your body. What is HA? What are the consequences? What's the difference between HA and PCOS, which is diagnosis that women often get in the situation when they're missing a period. And that's actually available for free on my website because I think it's so important that the diagnosis is correct. The second section is all about recovery, so, eating more, exercising less, ideas for stress relief and support while you're going through this. We have a chapter for partners so that they can kind of support us through, through this, the struggle, because many of them don't understand why it's so hard. And then there's a section on sort of all the fertility treatments and other treatments that you can use to potentially recover your cycles. But I talk about the oral medications, injections, IVF, sort of any of the fertility stuff that you might end up needing, because not everybody can restore their periods in the time frame that they want. And so, like I said, it's all about a balancing act. In this case, it can be a balance between wanting to do things naturally versus being okay with some fertility help from the medical doctors. I've actually had the book read by a couple of reproductive endocrinologists, and they're totally on board with everything I've said, so that made me feel really good. And then the next section is sort of on life afterwards. So pregnancy, I have a chapter on miscarriage, which is something that unfortunately about a third of us go through. I suffered a miscarriage myself. So my story is in there along with the stories of other women who've gone through this. So, and then sort of life afterwards. And, sometimes it's not that easy not to, once you don't have fertility as sort of a carrot, not to slip back into your old ways. And so we have a whole chapter on sort of staying the course and, and then the last section of the book is just a whole bunch of stories of other women who have gone through this, divided into different categories, and they were all taken from that message board. So I think one of the really helpful things if you're going through this is finding support. So I have a Facebook group that's, all, women who are trying to recover. There's the board, all sorts of knowing other people and having these people to bounce ideas off and, to vent to when you're feeling awful or when you have questions, it's huge. It makes such a big difference in the recovery. And so that's why we included so many stories of other women, because, seeing other people go through it, seeing people who sort of have the same, stats as you or the same situation, and, seeing them recover, seeing them get pregnant can be really, really helpful. And this is just a little exchange from one of the Facebook groups that you can look at, and you just see like everybody in the group is so amazing and supportive, and it's a wonderful community, and I think that it really makes a big difference in being able to recover, just having that support.
Absolutely. So where can they get the book?
Oh, yeah. So my website is www.noperiodnowwhat.com, and you can buy the paperback, you can buy the ebooks. There's a blog section that's got a whole bunch of other articles of, people ask me questions, and I'm like, oh, I have the data for that. So I go put together, a blog post and some more information. Like I have a post on how long it takes typically to recover cycles, which is about 6 months, and the fact that it really doesn't seem to make a difference how long you've been without a period to how long it takes to recover. You can buy it on Amazon, and yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, and we do have a code, a discount code for people who are watching. That's Tina, T-I-N-A, that you can use on my website for 10% off. So
that's me.
Yeah.
Okay, Nick. Well, we are wrapping up here, but thank you for all the wisdom, all the support. I'm sure this has been really helpful to a lot of people, and it's been really enjoyable. Yep, go for it.
One more thing, if people do have questions, there's a contact section on my website, and I'm really happy to speak with people and answer any questions that I can. So Shannon, if you want to email me and get more specific about your situation, I'd be happy to chat with you. So, and I do offer consulting as well. So
okay, good to know. Well, thank you for that, and I guess I'll quickly throw out my stuff. As even though I'm not running anymore right now, I am building a kind of running community called Running for Real, where I'm trying to help other people with their running. But I guess, you know, for most people watching this right now, it's probably not as relevant. I'd love if you would join my Running for Real community, but if not, you know, I'm happy to help anyone who is going through this. As you've kind of learned, I am going through this right now, so I can kind of say, you know, I remember that, I'm feeling that right now. So if anyone needs my help, you can find me at tinamuir.com, and yeah, let me know. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to Nick, thank you to Generation UCAN, the wonderful host of this. It's so important to kind of talk about, and wish you guys the best of luck in your recovery, or to anyone you may know who is going through recovery. So thanks so much.